2:34 p.m. The interruption comes exactly 41 seconds into Jasmine Crockett's testimony. She is explaining calmly, methodically, with data slides, to the Senate Committee on Economic Mobility how the proposed worker protection legislation would raise take-home pay in manufacturing counties by an average of $2,900 per household, citing BLS wage stagnation numbers and census poverty trends. Her voice is steady, prosecutorial, the way it always gets when she knows she is speaking unassailable truth, directly threatening a carefully cultivated lie. Then the voice cuts across the marble chamber, like a dull blade wrapped in velvet condescension. Madam Chair, point of order. The voice belongs to Vice President J.D. Vance, presiding in the chair that constitutionally makes him the President of the Senate, but practically makes him a potted plant with a tie. Most vice presidents avoid the duty because it is ceremonial and boring. Vance is here for one reason only. Jasmine Crockett is testifying, and 3 months ago she eviscerated Speaker Mike Johnson on the House floor so thoroughly that his moral authority still limps. Vance had been waiting for a public moment to remind her, and every black woman who dares speak with authority, that some men still believe they own the airtime. The room freezes the way it only does when something historic is about to go wrong. C-SPAN's live stream sits at 52,000 viewers who tuned in for dry policy discussion about overtime rules and never imagined they were about to witness political annihilation. Committee Chair Sherrod Brown, Democrat of Ohio, looks up with barely concealed irritation. The Vice President has the floor, though I'll note this is highly irregular during witness testimony. Vance leans forward in the presiding chair wearing the costume he has perfected over 8 long years. The $3,000 suit cut to look like $300, the tie that says, "I made it, but not too much," the calculated modesty of a man whose net worth is north of $7 million and who made his money managing other billionaires' money in Silicon Valley. Madam Chair, he begins, letting Congresswoman Crockett drip with that specific brand of male condescension that says you're speaking above your station. With all due respect to Congresswoman, he thickens the Ohio accent that disappears entirely when he's in San Francisco raising money. The accent is a prop like the suit. Some members, particularly those from urban coastal areas, simply do not understand the values, the concerns, the lived realities of working-class Americans. They come here with policies designed in think tank offices by progressive activists that sound good on PowerPoint, but have no connection to how real people in real communities live. Republican senators nod on cue. This is a song they paid for. This is a song J.D. Vance wrote in 2016 with Hillbilly Elegy and has been singing ever since. The Yale Law graduate who somehow still speaks with forgotten, the venture capitalist who claims to understand people who have never seen venture capital. He looks straight at Crockett now, the smirk barely hidden. Having grown up in Middletown, Ohio, having lived the struggles I wrote about in Hillbilly Elegy, I can tell you with certainty that the policies being discussed today reflect a fundamental disconnect from the people they claim to help. Perhaps the gentle lady from Dallas should spend less time lecturing working Americans and more time listening to them. Fox News producers are already cutting churns. VP Vance defends real America. Democratic senators shift uncomfortably. They know what is coming, even if they don't yet know how complete it will be. Chair Brown starts to object, but Jasmine Crockett does something that makes half the room inhale sharply. She smiles, not the polite congressional smile, the prosecutor smile, the one that says, "Thank you for stepping into my kill box." She reaches beside her witness table. 4 folders wait, red, blue, green, and gold, prepared over 4 weeks by an expanded team that now includes 2 XRS analysts, 1 Yale law student who wrote her thesis on J.D. Vance, and 3 investigative reporters who happily handed over years of receipts. She opens all 4 folders at once, fans them out like a royal flush, tabs and highlights visible to every camera. "Thank you, Mr. Vice President," she says, and her voice has shifted from policy expert to courtroom assassin. That was incredibly helpful framing for what comes next. The C-SPAN viewer count jumps from 52,000 to 89,000 in 40 seconds. Vance still has a smirk. He thinks he just delivered the clip of the day. He has no idea he just volunteered for the stand. Jasmine Crockett locks eyes with the presiding officer's chair. "Chair Brown, I appreciate the Vice President's passion about who truly understands working Americans. Since he interrupted my testimony specifically to question my grasp of their lived realities, and since he invoked his own background, his own book, his own claimed authenticity, I think it would be valuable for this committee and the American people to examine that authenticity in detail. She pauses just long enough for the silence to become uncomfortable. I'd like to invite Vice President Vance to step down from the chair and take the witness table. You can hear the oxygen leave the room. Inviting the Vice President of the United States to be cross-examined like a hostile witness is not a thing that happens. It is not in Robert's rules. It is not in the Constitution. It is not in the unspoken gentleman's agreement that keeps Washington's power dynamics intact. Republican senators turn to each other with expressions that say, "Wait, can she do that?" Democratic senators suddenly sit ramrod straight, fighting grins. Vance's face cycles rapidly. Surprise, irritation, calculation, practice, confidence. He still believes his performance is bulletproof. He still thinks the hillbilly elegy origin story is a shield nothing can pierce. He laughs the laugh men use when they think they're being magnanimous. "Congresswoman, I didn't come here to testify. I came to preside and offer perspective when members seem disconnected from the Americans they serve. I'm the Vice President of the United States." "I understand your title, Mr. Vice President," Crockett replies, voice like polished steel. "But you just used the power of that office to interrupt a black woman's testimony and lecture her about who does and does not understand working people. You invoked your personal story as proof of superior authenticity. So I'm simply asking, are you willing to defend that authenticity under scrutiny, or do you only feel comfortable lecturing others without being questioned yourself?" The trap is exquisite. If he refuses, he looks weak, exactly the fake populist who can dish condescension but can't take accountability. If he accepts, he faces a prosecutor with 4 folders of receipts. Either way, the mask slips. Vance, man who spent 8 years building the most lucrative working-class costume in American politics, cannot imagine anyone has receipts that matter. He genuinely believes mentioning his mama, and Pawpaw immunizes him forever. He stands. "Fine," he says, smirk still in place. "If the Congresswoman wants to waste committee time questioning my credentials to speak about working Americans, I'm happy to set the record straight. My life story speaks for itself." Those last 5 words will age like milk in hell. He walks down from the presiding platform in a carefully rumpled suit, the whole visual screaming, "I made it, but I never forgot where I came from." Even though where he came from ended 20 years ago and where he's been since his Yale Law, Sidley Austin, Peter Thiel's venture fund, and a personal net worth higher than 99.8% of the country. Chair Brown, shell-shocked but smelling blood, administers the oath with a hand that trembles slightly. Vance raises his right hand, swears to tell the whole truth, and sits at the witness table radiating confidence. He still thinks this will be easy. Jasmine Crockett's expression has gone flat, professional, lethal. What Vance does not yet grasp is that the next 90 minutes will be the political equivalent of a public autopsy performed on a man who thought he was immortal. Crockett picks up the first document from a blue folder, a page from Hillbilly Elegy, highlighted in neat, merciless yellow. "Thank you for taking the oath, Mr. Vice President. Since you invoked your memoir as evidence of authentic connection to working-class struggle, let's start there." She places the page so cameras can zoom in. Page 140. "Your words. We spend our way into the poorhouse. We buy giant TVs and iPads. We choose not to work when we should be looking for jobs." She lets it breathe. That's you writing that poor Appalachians choose poverty, that they buy iPads instead of working. Another highlighted page. Page 243. There's a lack of agency here, a feeling that you have little control over your life, and a willingness to blame everyone but yourself. Another. Page 89. Success is about the expectations you had for your own life. Poor people just don't expect enough. She lines the pages up like evidence photos. So the foundation of your claimed authenticity is a book that explicitly blames working-class people for their own poverty. You told wealthy readers that struggling communities are struggling because they lack personal responsibility, not because of deindustrialization, not because of trade policy, not because of corporate greed, but because they make bad choices and refuse to take accountability. She looks up. Is that an accurate summary of your thesis? Vance shifts. Hillbilly Elegy was a personal memoir about complex cultural factors. Yes or no, Mr. Vice President? Did you write those words? A 2-second pause that feels like 20. Yes. You wrote them. You blamed poor people for being poor. And you sold 3 million copies, mostly to coastal elites who wanted permission to believe poverty is a moral failing, not a policy choice. You made roughly $4 million telling rich people that poor people deserve it. She lets the number hang. Then you come here today, interrupt my testimony, and claim I don't understand working Americans, while your entire brand is built on blaming them for their own suffering. Vance tries to interrupt. She doesn't yield the floor. You monetized their pain, told elites it was their fault, and pocketed millions. That's not understanding, Mr. Vice President. That's exploitation. The C-SPAN counter hits 167,000 and climbing. Crockett moves to the green folder, biographical timeline. Let's examine the lived experience you invoke today. She holds up his Yale Law transcript. You graduated from Yale Law in 2013, one of the 3 most elite institutions in America. Then you clerked, then Sidley Austin, starting salary $190,000. Then Peter Thiel's Mithril Capital, then your own VC firm. By 2021, your disclosed net worth was $7 million. She lays documents in a perfect chronological line. Your lived experience of the past 12 years is elite education, corporate law, venture capital, and millionaire status. You have not worried about rent, groceries, or medical bills since George W. Bush was president. Another document. And let's talk about the name you perform under. Born James Donald Bowman, took stepfather's name Hamill. Then, right before publishing Hillbilly Elegy, legally changed to J.D. Vance because it tested better with focus groups. Even your name is a branding decision. James Bowman, Yale Law graduate, doesn't sell books. J.D. Vance, authentic hillbilly, does. She spreads the documents. So when you lecture me, a public defender who worked her way through law school representing a majority-minority working-class district, that I don't understand working people, while you, a Silicon Valley multimillionaire in a carefully rumpled suit, do. Can you explain what part making 7 figures managing billionaire money gives you superior insight into working-class life? Vance's smirk is gone. Red folder now. Authentic people are consistent. Manufactured people reverse every position when convenient. She builds 2 columns of quotes. 2016 Vance. Trump is America's Hitler. I'm a never-Trump guy. Cultural heroine. 2022 to 2024 Vance. Best president of my lifetime. Greatest leader since Lincoln. From supporting Medicaid expansion and unions to voting against both. From acknowledging climate change affects Appalachia to voting against every environmental regulation. From calling the opioid crisis a systemic emergency to voting against treatment funding. Every reversal perfectly timed with political ambition or donor pressure. That's not evolution, Mr. Vice President. That's opportunistic transformation. You don't have principles. You have focus groups. Gold folder, the kill shot. Your 2022 Senate campaign, $32 million. Single largest donor? Peter Thiel, $15 million. Top 20 donors? Almost exclusively venture capitalists, hedge fund managers, tech billionaires. She shows the chart. You vote with tech donor interests 93% of the time. Pharma 91%. Finance 96%. Working class priorities 23%. Another chart. Personal investments in companies at offshore Ohio jobs. You don't represent forgotten Americans. You represent the billionaires who purchase your seat. You're not a populist. You're an investment. Back to Hillbilly Elegy. Communities you claim to speak for reject you. Appalachian scholars, advocacy groups, local leaders, all on record. You perpetuated harmful stereotypes, ignored systemic causes, and profited while voting against help. You wrote about addiction, made millions, then voted against treatment funding. You wrote about economic devastation, then voted for billionaire tax cuts. You monetized suffering, blamed victims, and abandoned them the moment you had power. Crockett stands, arranges documents from all 4 folders into 4 perfect piles. The identity you sell versus the reality you live. The consistency you claim versus the reversals you performed. The independence you project versus the billionaire ownership you embody. The understanding you advertise versus the exploitation you delivered. She looks at him, not with anger, but with the calm of someone who just proved a case beyond reasonable doubt. You interrupted my testimony to lecture me about understanding working Americans. But I'm not the one who blamed them, sold them, and betrayed them. You are. She closes the folders. The receipts are public. Read the book. Check the votes. Follow the money. Verify everything I said. She sits. You can leave now, Mr. Vice President. We're done. Vance walks out while cameras capture every second of manufacturer identity in ruins. Within hours, hashtag Hillbilly Fraud trends worldwide. The 4 folders, red, blue, green, gold, become legend. And somewhere in America, working people who were told their poverty was their fault finally hear a different voice. One backed by policy, not performance. By service, not branding. By receipts, not rhetoric. The prosecutor rests. The fraud is exposed. The costume is off. And history record the day a prepared black woman from Dallas made a Silicon Valley venture capitalist in hillbilly drag testify to his own contradictions until the mask shattered and the puppet strings were finally visible to everyone. A political passion play in real time. Senate Dirksen Building, Room 106. November 24th, 2025, 2:34 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Cast: Jasmine Crockett, U.S. Representative, Democrat, Texas. Former public defender, J.D. Vance. Vice President of the United States. Presiding officer, Sherrod Brown, Chairman, Senate Committee on Economic Mobility. Senator's staff, C-SPAN crew, viewers, voiceover. 2 hours and 34 minutes. Crockett, mid-sentence, calm, surgical. Which is why restoring overtime eligibility for the bottom 38% of wage earners would put, on average, $2,900 a year back into the pockets of manufacturing households in counties that have lost more than 71,000 jobs since NAFTA. The data is from BLS table. Vance, interrupting. Thick Ohio drawl, turn up to 11. Madam Chair, point of order. The room temperature drops 5 degrees. Brown, irritated. The Vice President has the floor, though this is highly unusual during witness testimony. Vance leans forward in the presiding chair. The suit is perfect, expensive but made to look like J.C. Penney. The tie is red, white, and blue, but not too loud. The whole costume screams, I'm just like you, if you have a $7 million net worth and a venture capital Rolodex. Vance, with all due respect to the gentle lady from Dallas, some members from urban, coastal districts simply do not understand the values and live realities of working-class Americans. Pause for effect. Having grown up in Middletown, Ohio, having lived the struggles I wrote about in Hillbilly Elegy, I can tell you these policies reflect a fundamental disconnect from forgotten men and women of this country. Perhaps the Congresswoman should spend less time lecturing them and more time listening. Republican side, satisfied nods. Democratic side, sharpened takes a breath. C-SPAN viewer count, 52,000, 89,000 in 30 seconds. Crockett does not flinch. She smiles a smile prosecutors say for a moment the defendant realizes he just confessed on the stand. Crockett, thank you, Mr. Vice President. That was clarifying. Reaches down. Places 4 thick folders on the desk. Red, blue, green, gold. Chair Brown, given that the Vice President has questioned my understanding of working Americans and has invoked his own biography and book as superior credential, I move that we examine that credential in detail. I invite Vice President Vance to step down from the chair and take the witness table. Dead silence. You could hear a super PAC check drop. Brown, stunned but smelling blood. The Vice President is not required to. Vance, standing, still smirking. No. If the Congresswoman wants to question my right to speak for the people I came from, I'm happy to set the record straight. My life story speaks for itself. He swears the oath like a man who thinks charm is body armor. Crockett opens the blue folder first. Crockett, Let's start with the foundation of your claimed authenticity. Hillbilly Elegy holds up page 140 highlighted. Your words, Mr. Vice President. We spend our way into the poorhouse. We buy giant TVs and iPads. We choose not to work when we should be looking for jobs. Page 243. There's a lack of agency here, a feeling that you have little control over your life, and a willingness to blame everyone but yourself. She lets the quotes breathe. Crockett, you build a brand in roughly $4 million. Telling wealthy readers that Appalachian poverty is a cultural defect, not trade policy, not automation, not corporate greed, bad choices and bad character. Is that an accurate summary of the book you just invoked? Vance defensive. It was a personal memoir about complex cultural factors. Crockett, yes or no, sir? Did you write those sentences? Vance, yes. Crockett, thank you. Green folder. Crockett, now let's examine the lived experience you claim gives you superior insight. Yale Law, 2013. Sidley Austin Corporate Law, 2013 to 2014. Mithril Capital. Peter Till's Fund, Principal, 2016 to 2017. Nari Capital, your own VC firm, 2019. Disclose net worth by 2021, $7 million. Sets documents in a perfect timeline. You have not punched a working-class time clock since the iPhone 4 was new. Yet you told me, a black public defender from Dallas who still takes pro bono cases, that I don't understand struggle. Explain. Vance opens his mouth. Nothing convincing comes out. Red folder. Crockett. Consistency check. 2016. You called Donald Trump America's Hitler in private text and cultural heroine in The Atlantic. 2022. You called him the greatest leader since Abraham Lincoln. 2016. Supported Medicaid expansion. As senator, voted against it. 2016. Acknowledged climate change devastates Appalachia. As senator, voted against every major climate bill. 2016. Said unions built the middle class. As senator, voted against the PRO Act. The only variable that changed was political expediency. That's not growth. That's transactional cosplay. Gold folder, the kill folder. Crockett, your 2022 Senate race. $32 million raised. Largest donor. Peter Thiel, $15 million. Top 20 donors. Almost exclusively Silicon Valley billionaires and hedge fund partners. Giant chart. You vote with tech donor interests 93% of the time. Pharma donors, 91%. Finance, 96%. Working class priorities, higher wages. Stronger overtime, paid leave, affordable health care, 23%. You are not a populist. You are an asset with a purchased senator. She closes the folders one by one. The sound is final. Crockett, you change your name for branding. You thicken your accent for cameras. You wrote a book blaming poor people for poverty, sold it to rich people, and then voted against the very people you claim to understand. You are not the voice of forgotten America. You are the ventriloquist dummy of the people who forgot them first. She looks at him, calm, almost pitying. Crockett, the receipts are public. Read your own book. Check your own votes. Follow your own money. Everything I just said can be verified in under 10 minutes by any American with Wi-Fi. She sits. Crockett, you can leave now, Mr. Vice President. We're done. Van stands. The smirk is gone. The costume suddenly looks exactly like what it is. A several $1,000 suit on a man whose entire political identity just collapsed in real time. He walks out. Cameras follow every defeated step. C-SPAN viewer count at the end. 347,000 and still climbing. Within 90 minutes. Hashtag Hillbilly Fraud trends #1 worldwide. 4 folders, red, blue, green, gold, become the most famous office supplies in American history. By nightfall, the clip of Crockett's final line, "You can leave now, Mr. Vice President. We're done," has 42 million views. And somewhere in Dallas, a former public defender closes 4 folders, stacks them neatly, and goes back to writing legislation that will actually help the people J.D. Vance spent a decade pretending to be. Fade out on the four folders sitting alone on the witness table. Bathed in C-SPAN's unforgiving fluorescent light, the receipts remain. The fraud does not. Vance interrupts Representative Jasmine Crockett while she is giving expert testimony on worker protection legislation. He does it in the most condescending, as a real working-class American way possible. Crockett, who in real life is a former public defender with a reputation for razor-sharp cross-examination, calmly invites him to leave the presiding chair and sit as a witness. Vance, overconfident, accepts. For the next 90 minutes, she uses for color-coded folders of receipts his own book quotes, voting record donor lists, old anti-Trump statements, financial disclosures, name change documents, etc., to dismantle his entire public persona as an authentic voice of the white working class. She proves, point by point, that his populism is manufactured, his wealth is elite, his votes serve billionaires, especially Peter Thiel, and Hillbilly Elegy itself is victim-blaming grift that Ida ends with a devastating line. "You can leave now, Mr. Vice President. We're done." And Vance walking out humiliated while the internet explodes with hashtag hillbilly fraud. Why this fantasy exists and spread so fast? Jasmine Crockett has become a progressive/online left hero for her viral floor speeches and clapbacks, especially against Republican men. Jada D. Vance is deeply disliked by the same online left for A. Hillbilly Elegies, poor people are culturally broken. Thesis, B. His total 180 degrees on Trump. C. The obvious Peter Thiel funding, and D. The widespread perception that his working-class champion persona is fake. Progressives have been waiting for years for someone to do exactly what the script imagines. Put every contradiction in one room, on live TV, with receipts. So the script is essentially the political equivalent of an Avengers-level team-up fantasy. What if the smartest, most prepared prosecutor in Congress got 90 uninterrupted minutes to cross-examine the guy we hate the most, using only his own words and voting record? That's it. It's not real. As of April 2025, nothing even close to this has happened. But it is one of the most successful pieces of left-leaning political copium ever written, because millions of people watched the clips and thought, God, I wish this would happen. The hearing was only 12 minutes long, but it felt like a public execution in slow motion. Representative Jasmine Crockett, calm and methodical, laid 4 folders on the table in front of the vice president, red, blue, green, gold, like a dealer laying down a royal flush. Each folder was tabbed, highlighted, and annotated with the precision of a prosecutor who had spent months preparing for this single moment. J.D. Vance sat beneath the cameras, ties slightly loosened, trying to project the easy confidence of the hillbilly who had clawed his way out of Appalachian poverty into Yale Law and the United States Senate. It was a performance he had perfected for nearly a decade. On this day, the mask cracked and never went back on. The red folder was his own words. Every campaign speech in which he thundered that he would fight for forgotten men and women. Every podcast clip where he claimed to be the only one in Washington who truly understood working-class pain because he had lived it. Crockett played them in sequence, the audio crisp and damning. Then came the blue folder, the voting record. 94% of the time, when a bill came up that would have raised the minimum wage, expanded overtime pay, protected pensions, strengthened unions, or kept manufacturing jobs from being shipped overseas, Senator, and now Vice President, Vance had voted no. She didn't raise her voice. She simply turned the pages so the cameras could see the tally sheets. The green folder was a donor list. Peter Thiel's $15 million super PAC contribution, the speaking fees routed through Shell LLCs, the venture capital seed money for Nari Capital, the quiet book promotion budget that had pushed Hillbilly Elegy onto every bestseller list in 2016. The gold folder was the book itself. Pages flagged where Vance blamed Appalachian poverty on the laziness, addiction, and moral failure of poor people themselves rather than on the factory closures and predatory lending that had actually gutted the region. By the time she finished, the hearing room was silent except for the clicking of camera shutters. Vance's answers were the verbal equivalent of flailing, misrepresentation, out of context, complex legislative process. None of it landed. Twitter, now X, was already exploding with side-by-side clips. Vance in a flannel shirt in an Ohio diner promising to stand with workers, Cut immediately to the roll call vote where he killed the PRO Act. The hashtag receipts trended for 48 straight hours. Republican strategists went into full meltdown. Anonymous quotes poured to Politico and Axios. This is a catastrophic blow to our working-class messaging. If Vance is exposed as a billionaire's puppet, it undermines our entire populist strategy. We can't have our VP be the face of fake populism. Inside the Democratic war rooms, the mood was euphoric but disciplined. Within 6 hours, the DNC had cut 3 different 30-second spots using Crockett's footage. One ended simply with white text on black. He claimed to represent you. His donors own him. His votes prove it. They were on the air in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin by the next morning. 2 weeks later, the Trump White House tried damage control. J.D. Vance simply disappeared from public view. No more rallies in Youngstown or Scranton. No more photo ops at steel mills wearing a hard hat 2 sizes too large. When he did surface, it was behind the velvet ropes of Manhattan fundraisers or in the manicured gardens of Hillsborough mansions. Protesters followed him with hand-painted signs. Real hillbilly or Till's puppet? How much did they pay for the flannel costume? The irony was so thick you could spread it on toast. Investigative reporters, smelling blood, went to work. ProPublica published a forensic analysis of Vance's personal investment portfolio, demonstrating that he still held 7-figure stakes in companies that had offshored thousands of jobs from the very Rust Belt towns he claimed to champion. The Washington Post uncovered additional undisclosed benefits from Peter Thiel. Speaking fees laundered to the Federalist Society, a quiet $400,000 book advance supplement from a Thiel-adjacent imprint, introductions to every conservative media booker in the country. The New York Times dropped a hammer with a 9,000-word Sunday magazine piece titled The Making of J.D. Vance, How Silicon Valley Created a Political Persona. It read like the origin story of a luxury brand, not a politician. Thiel and a small circle of tech billionaires had seen the Trump movement's need for a translator who could speak both Ivy League and Appalachia. They found a malleable former venture capitalist who had grown up poor enough to be plausible, polished enough to pass at Davos, and ambitious enough to read from whatever script they handed him. They funded the memoir, seeded the promotion, built the myth, and bought the Senate seat. The article included emails obtained legally. The Times was careful to note, where Till's lieutenants refer to Vance as our asset and the product. Sales of Hillbilly Elegy spiked again, but this time people were reading it like a crime scene. Book clubs in Cincinnati and Pittsburgh and Knoxville annotated the victim-blaming passages in furious marginalia. Appalachian advocacy groups released a 40-page community guide titled Reading Hillbilly Elegy Critically, systematically dismantling the book's stereotypes and demonstrating how it had been weaponized to deflect blame from extracted corporations onto the people they extracted from. The PDF went viral in academic and activist circles within days. At Ohio State, where Vance had established a scholarship fund bearing his name, students marched with signs that read, "We don't want blood money from poverty porn." The university quietly renamed the fund. In Middletown, the town that had once embraced its famous son, his face was painted over on the Middletown Heroes mural downtown. The local library moved every copy of Hillbilly Elegy from local authors to general circulation, spine out, no special display. 3 Republican senators told colleagues in private that they were now deeply concerned about having Vance on the 2028 ticket. 2 major donors, one a manufacturing heir from Michigan, the other an oil and gas magnate from Texas, called a Trump political operation to say the vice president had become a net negative. Focus groups were brutal. A Kentucky machinist, lifelong Republican, told the moderator, "I thought he was one of us. Turns out he was never one of us. He was using us to get power for rich people." That quote ran on the front page of the Louisville Courier-Journal under the headline Betrayed. Conservative think tanks that had once lionized Vance began memory holing him. The American Enterprise Institute took down his author page. The Heritage Foundation quietly scrubbed citations of Hillbilly Elegy from new papers on poverty policy. The book had become radioactive. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett became the most sought-after surrogate in the Democratic Party. Union halls in Toledo and Erie and Allentown packed the house when she came to speak. Community colleges in the Mahoning Valley put her on panels about economic justice. Her message never wavered. Real representation means real action. Real understanding means real policy. Real authenticity means your record matches your rhetoric. Publishers started a bidding war for her memoir. The reported advance crossed 7 figures before Thanksgiving. Peter Thiel, ever the rationalist, cut his losses with clinical efficiency. A spokesperson released a statement that managed to be both bloodless and devastating. Mr. Till's investment in Mr. Vance's campaign was based on policy alignment at the time. Mr. Thiel has no ongoing role in Mr. Vance's political activities. Translation: the asset has been written down to zero. Vance tried a media tour to rehabilitate himself, but every interviewer now came armed with the 4 folders. On Meet the Press, Kristen Welker simply read a passage from Hillbilly Elegy about learned helplessness among the poor, then rolled a vote where Vance opposed expanding Medicaid in Ohio. "Can you explain the disconnect, Mr. Vice President?" Vance stammered about complex policy considerations and multiple factors. The clip became the most-watched political moment of a year. His approval rating settled into permafrost. 38% nationally, 41 approve/51 disapprove among non-college white voters, 35 approve/58 disapprove in Greater Appalachia. The brand was dead. Inside the GOP, the conversation turned serious. He was brought on for one reason. A senior Trump advisor told the Bulwark off the record, working-class authenticity. That's gone. Without it, he's just another rich lawyer who went to Yale. We can't run with that in 28. Ohio Democrats recruited a United Steelworkers chapter president to run against him whenever he dared seek re-election. The campaign slogan wrote itself, "Real Ohio versus fake populism." The White House quietly sidelined him. No more economic policy rollouts. No more swing state rallies. Vance's public schedule filled with the traditional vice presidential paste eaters. State funerals, ribbon cuttings, bilateral meetings with the Deputy Prime Minister of Luxembourg. He had become the very definition of ceremonial irrelevance. Hillbilly Elegy entered the canon of cautionary tales. Sociology and political science syllabi listed it alongside reefer madness propaganda and Clinton-era welfare queen rhetoric. An example of how elites monetize the narrative of poverty to avoid solving it. Netflix added a content warning before the movie adaptation. Contains outdated and harmful stereotypes about Appalachian people. Sales collapsed. Remainder copies gathered dust in Ollie's bargain bins. Language itself shifted. Pundits spoke of candidates pulling a Vance, claiming working-class roots while voting with the Chamber of Commerce. Activists coined a verb to Vance, to manufacture an identity for political gain, and then abandon it when the check's clear. 6 months after the hearing, 3 scenes captured what was left of the man and the myth. Scene 1, a glass and steel office tower in San Francisco, 83 floors above the bay. Peter Thiel sat behind a desk the size of a small parade ground. J.D. Vance sat opposite him, no longer bothered with the flannel or the practiced "ah-shucks" grin. The conversation was cold, analytical, stripped of illusion. The authenticity narrative is no longer viable, Thiel said, not unkindly. The receipts are too comprehensive. You'll need to pivot to explicit elite representation. Drop the working-class performance entirely. Position yourself as the business-friendly Republican, the venture guy who understands technology and growth. Vance stared out at the water. The base will never accept that. The base already rejected you, Thiel replied. 35% approval in Appalachia. The Hillbilly brand is finished. You're toxic to the exact voters you were purchased to attract. Your only remaining utility is the donors, and even that's compromised because you're now seen as a failed investment. There was nothing left to argue. The product had spoiled. Scene 2, Middletown, Ohio, a Thursday evening town hall meeting in the high school gymnasium. The topic was economic development grants. 200 people filled the bleachers. Nobody mentioned their senator-turned-vice president until a reporter asked whether the community felt let down. An older man in a UAW jacket stood up. J.D. Vance still held the title of Vice President of the United States, still rode in motorcades, still saluted Marines on the South Lawn. But everyone understood the office, and the man inside it had been hollowed out. His political career was functionally over, reduced to waiting for a pardon that would never be necessary because no crime had been charged, only exposure. He had learned the hardest lesson a politician can learn. Performance only works until someone documents reality. Manufactured authenticity crumbles the moment sunlight hits the receipts. You can wrap yourself in flannel, quote scripture, sprinkle your speeches with mama and pop until the teleprompter glows. But if your votes serve billionaires while your book blames the poor for being poor, eventually a prepared woman with 4 color-coded folders will stand up and ask you to explain the 94%.